plea bargain is an agreement between the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution is trying to avoid going to trial, and the defense is trying to seek a more favorable position in the courts. There are basically three types of plea bargains. You have a person who bargains their charges. This is probably the most common and widely used, where a person will plead to a lesser crime in order to receive a lighter sentence. Then you also have sentence bargaining. This is when a person will plead guilty in order to receive a lesser amount of time. You see it all the time where people will plead guilty in order to receive probation. Then you also have fact bargaining. This is when the defense says, I will accept these certain facts as long as these other facts are not entered into evidence. The first thing you have to understand is that Dr. York was arrested May 8, 2002. There was a bond hearing or a arraignment on May 9th, 2002, in which Dr. York initially entered into a plea of not guilty. Time transpired between that and the actual plea agreement, and Dr. York basically explains it best himself.
She already heard me say I didn't trust him before the so-called, plea agreement. And before I already said I don't trust him, I don't want to work with them. And they just kept hiding. They actually shackled me and made me come out to the phone. It was actually coming in, put me in shackles, and drive me to the phone and talk to God. While he reiterates, you must take a plea. It's better for you to take a plea. You know, since you're suffering like this, you're facing 1,000 years. I'll never be able to win this case. I've had cases like this before. Why you let these other girls suffer? Why do you know these people suffer? Don't think about yourself. If you was my son, that I would do this for you. I would tell you to do this. He was working all the time with them, and I knew it. Because I knew they had no case. I knew there was no such thing as no videos. I knew the witness they talked about. I knew this was all a big plot. And he didn't want to fight this case because he was made a deal with them.
He was basically influenced or basically persuaded by an attorney who was paid $1.5 million. This is attorney Ed Garland and his firm. They had no intention on going to trial. In fact, if you look at the history of the Garland firm, they are known for entering into plea agreements. Again, this avoids trial. This avoids work for an attorney, the prosecution and the defense.
Garland made it clear that he didn't think he could beat this case. And I was like, it's time to get rid of him. After he had taken $1.5 million from our tribe, he was ready to sign over an agreement, which his firm is known for, selling agreements and selling people out. Took over $1.5 million, as I'm told, cash money from our tribe, and just flaunted it and didn't even use it. Never intended on having a trial, but intended to put their bogus plea. But they knew I wasn't going to take a plea, so they had to torture me into taking a plea.
What they were explaining to Dr. York is that the land that we acquired, our tribe, the land of Tamaray, which was on 404 Shadydale Road, would be left alone. Dr. York knew that he is the one they really wanted to stop. Dr. York knew that the other so-called co-defendants who were dragged into this were only dragged into it because they wanted to get Dr. York. And Dr. York was given a short span of time to accept the plea agreement, and Dr. York never even seen the plea agreement itself. Again, he was under duress and was in a position where he was left little options other than taking this plea. He wanted the other people who were involved to go free, because this is what they promised him. This is what they told him. They told him that the conditions that they were in were very similar to the conditions Dr. York was in.
But they knew I wasn't going to take a plea, so they had to torture me into taking a plea.
Now, in that torture, you were, what was the experience that you learned of the other co-defendants?
I was told that they were being treated the same way I'm treated. That means I was sleeping on a concrete floor with real poor, bad food, wasn't getting my medication, watching rats and roasted bugs and stuff, in the midst of very dangerous criminals, boat gallery, fights breaking out, people getting stabbed, suicides. I watched 4 or 5 people commit suicide. I was put up in the middle of a riot up in Atlanta, and some guy some Italian guy from the mafia supposed to hung himself, and there was a riot between the Florida boys and the Georgia boys. All this is going on, and the black Muslims are, you know what I mean? And I said, yeah, these kids are subject to that. I knew the sheriff how Richard Fields, right? Got names for these 2 young ladies, which is Sandra Lampkin and Khadija Merritt, out of an 8-year-old magazine that we put out. That's the only case. The only people in this case involves 3 people that's in a magazine. That's where he got the names from. He got Johnson's name because Kathy Johnson is standing behind me in the magazine while we're advertising Egyptian attire for our lodge. Those 2 girls are being described as looking exactly a replica to the ancient Egyptian deities, right? So that's where he got the Sandra Lampkin, Khadija Merritt, and Kathy Johnson to put the kids. And he figured they'll torture them. If I think they're tortured, I know that Kathy suffered from MS, which is a very, very dangerous disease. I said, they're not giving me my medicine. Hers is brain deteriorating. She'll be crippled for life. They used that, not to mention starvation, sleep degradation, where they kept waking me up. No allowed to telephone calls, interfere with my mail, definitely poor diet, a whole bunch of things, and just outright vulgar and physical abuse.
Now, prior to this so-called agreement that was given to you,
yes.
What was told to you about the other co-defendants during this whole torturous experience?
They told me that those people would go home free, totally free. There'd be nothing to be all over it, and you'd be the one that bears the burden. Because after all, you're the trophy that Putnam County wants. The state of Georgia wants you. That's it. The land, they'll leave their people in those land alone, and everything will go away. And that's the promises that they were lying. They kept me up for 3 days, Garland's firm. They kept sending in their own psychiatrist, and they kept me up all the way to the day before. I didn't have but, I don't know how many hours exactly. I think I had about 8 hours to make a decision on the plea. It wasn't like I had time to go back and forth and evaluate it on him. They kept me up all night with psychiatrist. I didn't say that next morning we got to get the plea now. I never got a chance to read the plea agreement. That was the whole thing. They kept me under the pressure and scrutiny of their psychiatrist over the whole night. And then took me back to the cell around 4 or 5, and then called me back out at 6 before I could even get back to get to sleep. And then started with the plea agreement. I never read the papers. I never knew nothing about the papers, just like the PSR or PSI, whatever they call it. I didn't know anything about none of that stuff. They had already had this thing planned.
Just moving forward within this time period, that was January 24th of 2002 that you were tortured and taking these plea agreements. Now, you were imprisoned all the way up and currently still incarcerated all the way up until May 29th was a sentencing date?
Yes.
Now, at that point in time, were you given any indication or anything going on with your case from any of your attorneys between January 24th?
I was getting no communication from the Garland firm. Every now and then they would send a little guy in called Charles. Or, you know what I'm saying? And he would actually discuss the Bible and history with me. Nothing to do with doctor. He was trying to get those guys. He would not even go into, anything with the case. I told him from day one, I did not trust him. Then the judge tried to claim the other day that this is some new idea, but that was proven false the following day by Mr. Rob Peaches in his own article, where he states very clearly that Malachi told the psychiatrist way back that he did not trust Garland. He said he was working with Seals. So if that's true, then the letter I issued to the judge the other morning in downstairs in a private meeting, because he didn't want to hear it in the public because he was afraid of its implications, that he made his own personal assumption that this is something I feel you did. There's a ploy you're doing. How's that possible if I already told a legally recognized Georgia State psychiatrist that I didn't trust the man, and it's on their records.